Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name's Joe Kuzma, and I am back for the first time with my fellow cohort and colleague, Mr. Brian E. Roach. Brian, for lack of better words, how are you doing today?
How you doing?
I'm
good.
We were just offline, but we weren't offline, and Brian and myself realized that we got into a sidebar conversation that had nothing to do with football, nothing to do with the Steelers, and just completely would have derailed this show for lack of better terms. So we're going to just keep that tabled. We'll just say that Brian is a fan of the show Friends, and, my wife watches it an awful lot. I know it through osmosis. I was always a Seinfeld guy, so I know you're a Seinfeld guy too, so you must have enjoyed that era of television.
I enjoy streaming.
Okay. So, and I enjoy binging, I guess. I don't know. Hey, did you know? Did you know it was like maybe yesterday or the day before, in case folks have to catch up, if you watched one Game of Thrones episode per day, you would catch up, you'd watch all of them all the way through and up to the premiere. So you may have to watch one or two here, but put that one on the calendar for yourselves. Because, we're talking about all this stuff because football's over. There's no more. Wait, there is more football, but no more NFL football. And anyways, I disowned the NFL a few weeks ago, and I refuse to acknowledge. Not my Super Bowl team. I'm going to go with that hashtag. That's all we got to say about that. I'm just going to completely ignore all of that stuff that was going on. With one asterisk here. One thing I will throw out there. The crazies who think Julian Edelman is a future Hall of Famer, he's got to do something for another 6 or 7 years to catch somebody who can't even get into the finalists in one Hines Ward. Don't at me. We are going to talk about Hines Ward today, ironically, because we're talking about, I just said football's not over. This is kind of like the I guess, catchphrase or whatever. It's just beginning or whatever with this new Alliance of American Football. I hope I say it right. It's the AAF. And it's intriguing because I've seen just very little advertisement for it. Of course, it's an upstart league. A lot of people are going to roll their eyes like, why are you two talking about this? Well, there's some ties to the Steelers with former Steelers and whatnot. We're going to get into that. There's also some interesting rule changes that or things that they're trying to innovate or do with this league. And it gives some players, some veteran players, a second maybe leash on life or lease on life. How's that saying? I screw up. Some of these cliches, they get changed around like that. You know what I mean? What's
lease is correct, lease. I believe.
It's like people who say mute point and moot point. It's like mute point wasn't a thing. It's moot point.
No, it's moo. It's a moo point. Oh. It's like a cow's opinion. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Brian, do you think the cows stink because they wear the same colors? Oh no, those are zebra stripes. Never mind. I'll go
zebras.
With the
yes.
referees, but the cows still stink. So, anyways, they can't help it. They're cows.
Yeah, can't argue with that. Sorry.
But yeah, we have the AAF coming up this weekend, and there's 8 teams, and they're scattered about the country, and there's some former Steelers, and we say this a little some of this is a little tongue in cheek. We'll go through some of these names here in a bit because some of these guys had basically a cup of coffee with the team. Maybe like training camp type guys, practice squad guys. In fact, I drew the line. There was a guy that was invited to a rookie mini camp that actually wasn't on the roster in any other way. And I said, nope, sorry, draw the line right there. But a lot of high-powered people involved in this thing. Charlie Ebersol, son of Dick Ebersol, is one of the principal, I guess, material people that are involved in getting this thing going. And, Dick Ebersol is famous for, being the NBC sports guy. And any of you that saw that ESPN, I think it was just the 30 for 30. Yeah, it was the 30 for 30 with the XFL. And the XFL is supposed to be coming back too. And I have no idea how that fits into this. But that was a venture with, WWE's Vince McMahon back in the early 2000s. I want to say 2001-ish or something. Does that that sound about right? I think so, because Roethlisberger would have come around. Ben was drafted, what, 04? So...
Yeah,
because Tommy Maddox was the MVP of the lone season that the XFL had. He was with the Los Angeles team. I think they were the Extreme, which is just I don't know. Some of the names for these teams just I don't know. I guess you got to Steelers wouldn't necessarily maybe make sense in 2019, but back then it's got some heritage and tradition, so maybe that's what some of these teams need. But I've always been like, you realize there aren't that many teams that are singular named in all of professional sports. Almost all of them are plural, and almost all of them end in S, unless you get into baseball with like the White Sox and the Red Sox with that, and even that's just a play on words for a word that does end in S. So there's a little fun fact for people. We're all over the place today, but we're trying to give you some reasons maybe that you may be interested in this Alliance of American Football. And they got 8 teams, and they're all over. And one of the first things I'm going to point out is that all of the team names, I guess, are rooted in something that's going on in those areas. There's a team in San Diego called the Fleet that's supposed to honor the U.S. Navy presence there. I guess the San Antonio Commanders is also a nod to all of the military installations and, being the home of the Alamo. The Orlando Apollos are actually named after the Apollo mission that went to the moon, the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11 coming up, with NASA being in Florida. That's where most of the rockets and stuff, I guess, launch.
Sure.
I mean, there's the Atlanta Legends. Arizona Hotshots are named for wilderness firefighters. I guess the Legends is from just culture, sports, civil rights, all that type of stuff. Salt Lake Stallions, I don't know about that. I guess it says animals that help tame the area. That might be a reach for that one. Birmingham Iron, that's kind of like the Pittsburgh Steelers. So that's an industry that was very important to Birmingham, Alabama. And Memphis Express, I guess, is because they're a transportation hub, as odd as that is. But those are your teams, and they all tend to kind of be in better, I guess, not so nasty climates, so to speak. So... And I want to say that, doing that, they're going to play, I guess, on weekends, Saturdays, Sundays. The times for the games won't oppose each other. So if you want to watch all of them, it's at least football. And you know what? It's not too much of a big departure from regular football as much as the Canadian Football League. I guess, Brian, as much as I'm talking, do you have any interest in the AAF?
Well, I do, in the sense that it'll be... Unlike a lot of these other leagues that have popped up, this is designed to be a collaborative effort to a certain extent with the NFL. Maybe even eventually, position itself as a minor league, so to speak. They're making an effort to very clearly state they're not in competition. And in fact, a lot of these games are going to be aired on NFL Network. So the NFL is kind of, joining in with this league. And that's intriguing to me because, we get a lot of players who we end up on practice squads who end up not quite making it. But if they had time to develop, time to grow, they might have. You've got Arena League players, you've got World Football League players back in the day when the World Football League existed that eventually actually did contribute in the NFL. But they needed time to develop their skills a little more. So that's intriguing here. And then the second part of this, which I know we're going to talk about, because you already kind of mentioned it, is this could be an area where changes to the rules, changes to the structure of the game can be sort of beta tested, and to see how do they impact the game, how do they impact the flow of the game. Do they make it better? Do they make it worse? As opposed to, the rules committee in the NFL just sitting in a hotel conference room, hammering out some rule changes and hoping that it doesn't change things too much. This gives them a chance, maybe, to experiment with some stuff that these guys have tried already.
Yeah. One of the other chief principal people involved in this is Hall of Famer now, Bill Polian, general manager, I guess famously known as an architect of those Indianapolis Colts teams with like Tony Dungy and Peyton Manning and whatnot. And he's been around the block more than once. And, they're trying to structure it in such a way that the players are paid like incentive bonuses, as they're basically all on the same, I think they're like on 2 or 3 year contract deals. And it's not a whole lot of money. It's like maybe $250,000 over 3 years, but they get incentives for, performance on the field and performance off the field too, because fan engagement's a big thing with them. But I found the most interesting thing, as you said, CBS is going to air, I guess, the inaugural or opening kickoff game here coming up on Saturday, I believe. And then there's NFL Network and CBS Sports and TNT, and you don't see a whole lot of advertisement with that. I would have thought they would at least. I didn't see anything during the Super Bowl that I remember, unless I got up, use the restroom, the pee break. But I don't even really do that during the Super Bowl because the commercials were. No, they weren't really as more entertaining, but typically they're more entertaining, or they're a reason to sit on the couch. They may have been more entertaining than the game this year. However, I'm going to throw some shade. I don't care. It's the Patriots. Anyways, but there's some things here I was mentioning. Yeah, there's some veteran players. There's some players that hadn't quite made it, may have fallen through the cracks, and there's a mix of that. There's a lot of there's coaches like Mike Martz, Dennis Erickson, Mike Singletary that are leading these teams. There's a lot of guys with a lot of pro experience, and then there's some others that are on their staff that are kind of, trying to get their own chops, so to speak, get some experience under their belt. And this season runs now brilliantly and effectively. The reason that they want to play in those cities that I mentioned, because of better weather. Also, location for travel, it makes it more cost effective for all of this. So we're not going to see any games in Pittsburgh, unfortunately, or anywhere in the Midwest, East Coast, anywhere where it's going to snow. You might as well just think about it as potential Super Bowl host cities, but smaller towns that, San Diego doesn't have a football team anymore. They're always looking, is San Antonio going to be a place? Birmingham always hosts the Senior Bowl. Orlando has the Pro Bowl. So there are areas that, maybe football starved. And I think they're playing mostly, if not all, at different college stadiums. I don't know how well attended any of this will be. I don't know how TV ratings or anything are going to be like. I just found it was interesting that I didn't see a commercial during the Super Bowl, because here's your largest audience of football fans. You would think that CBS, at least trying to get people onto their platforms, would make slight mention of it. And it seemed like the NFL kind of stifled that, as opposed to, I know I saw it during the regular season, if not the playoffs, they would make a mention of it. Maybe not a full-blown commercial, but just like a little add-on type thing, like where you're mentioning sponsors, or they mention TV shows, for example, like, Big Bang Theory or something like that. You know what I mean? They tend to mention that, and they give it like a 5 or 10 second mention from the hosts, like Tony Romo. I don't know, but Tony Romo, Jim Nantz, those type of guys. No, I'm like, I don't know. Tony, he's not usually the one that says that stuff, though. It's usually the play-by-play guy. He's like, the True. MC. So that was kind of interesting. But the season, I'm jumping around. The season goes from this upcoming weekend, first weekend without football. Typically after the Super Bowl, almost all the way up until the NFL draft. It's 10 weeks, I believe, a full 10-week regular season schedule, and then the top half of the teams play like a semifinals and then a championship game. And this gets guys prepared, because then there's going to be an NFL draft. Now the NFL teams will be able to maybe look at this, review some film of some players. Let's say, for example, running back Matt Asiata. I think he may be with Birmingham, but he's an example. Trent Richardson's another guy that's in this, trying to maybe make an NFL comeback. You could see him on film, and then these guys are done, and then the NFL teams, because none of these guys are going to get signed in free agency. You know what I mean? These guys, they're pretty much outside that window, or they're guys that need to get back into that cycle. And this might be a good way to also prep some of the younger guys who, you're a young guy, you had one shot, maybe you're undrafted or a low draft pick, you had one shot, you didn't make an NFL roster for whatever reason, and now you get a chance to put some things on tape. You get a little bit more experience, and you may have some value, or at least get offered a tryout or one of these, spots on a 90-man roster to go into training camp and compete for a spot with an NFL team. I think it's a good idea. I think the way it's structured is good, because these guys won't be entering free agency more than likely. And so now they get to do something, stay busy, keep their bodies fresh, put something on tape. Everybody can see it. And then once teams go through the draft process, they're going to see what holes they have. And then you might see some of these guys picked up in like May or June before, training camps and all these other things. Maybe some of the other off-season workout stuff really gets ramped up. So I really enjoy that. Before I jump in the rules, I'll get your opinion on some of this. And then we're going to talk about some some of the former Steelers who are actually involved with this, either from a league or business standpoint, up to guys that are actually going to be on the field, so you know who to watch and look out for.
Yeah, I like the idea, as I was saying, of a league that provides opportunity for guys who didn't get it yet, that may have been slipped through the cracks kind of guys that require just a little more development, a little more time, and this is an opportunity for them to get it. And while it'll be interesting to see, because as you mentioned, the vast majority, in fact, I think all these teams are pretty much in, as you said, environmentally friendly areas for the time of year that they're playing. And that means there's not a lot of northern teams. And you do, because look, let's be fair and honest. There's a huge amount of population in the Northeast. Is it going to catch on enough to sustain itself? That's one question I have. But I love the idea of this, and I think it'll be, I don't know, it's going to be tough to decide, whether you just watch it to watch it, or whether you eventually latch onto a team and really truly support that team.
Yeah, that's going to be the tough part, because I imagine these rosters are going to have a lot of, makeover from year to year, kind of like Arena. The guys aren't making a whole lot of money. It's very tough to live and continue your dream if you're going to play 3 years in like an AAF or something like that. But certainly there's got to be some intrigue. And a lot of what they're doing here is like territorial with the way they built the rosters. They had a unique outlook on like the quarterback position that you could look at too. It was almost like I forget the word that they use for it, pick or protect or something like that, or basically, there was somebody, like any of the quarterbacks that were in the territories or regions for those teams. It was, they could choose whether to keep them or try and get pluck somebody from the pool, so to speak. And you'll notice this even like with the San Antonio team. A lot of the guys are Texas-based players, and that helps too, because they're there with their families. They're not making necessarily a fortune. I think it's a decent salary to play a game, especially if you're playing, minimum 10 weeks and you're putting in some practice in that. I'm curious to see what the product on the field is going to be like. And part of that is, what really surprised me with this is that they have 52 player rosters. And I mean, they're made up of, they made them up of like colleges, designated guys who came from designated pro teams, CFL, and things of that nature. It's protect or pick. I'm actually reading it right now for the quarterbacks, but I don't quite understand the roster makeup, but I'm sure it'll be explained to us further. They're trying to do no television timeouts or commercials. So they're going to say 60% fewer full screen commercials. What they're aiming to do here, as Charlie Ebersol is saying, that a full length feature movie or adult attention span, 120 minutes, 2 hours. Okay, so they're trying to squeeze a football game into this window and not have a bunch of stops and commercial breaks and things of that nature. So it's going to be very much like trying to watch like a soccer game, Major League Soccer, English Premier League. A lot of those games, you have 90 minutes, 2 45-minute halves, 15-minute halftime, and if they add time, they don't stop the clock in soccer. I know it's foreign for some people, but they fit that into that window. They don't take commercial breaks. They show advertisement on the sidelines. They show it on the screen or in the corner or with the clock and the score and stuff like that. So that's one thing. The play clock is another thing that they made 5 seconds shorter. It's cut down from 40 to 35 from the NFL, and that's to help speed up play. But I also feel if they would have shaved that any more, then it probably would have hurt the product on the field. All you got to do is look at Chip Kelly and those Eagles when he was there. That worked for about 4 or 5 games, and all of his players were like, "This is insanity," running those plays so much. But I think the big one to start is I'm even surprised they have kickers on these teams, because the kickers are pretty much going to be relegated to just field goal attempts. There are no extra point attempts. Everything's a 2-point conversion attempt following a touchdown, and there are no kickoffs in this league. And I think that's somewhere the NFL is trying to head. And they also have a very interesting concept for, this onside kick thing. We were talking about how this is all broken, and the way they want to do this is, my eyes are glazing over, but it's like a 4th and 10. I'm trying to see where it's at. Well, of course, if there's anything like that, it's the same. They just start on the 25-yard line, the same as a touchback when it comes to the kickoffs. And then I'm trying to find it, and I can't find it here, but they have like an onside kick change, and it's like a 4th and 10, I believe, from your own 35-yard line. You could take in lieu of just giving the other team the ball. Of course, if you don't convert, you turn the ball over with the team breathing down your neck now on your 35. And that's opposed to just giving them the ball on the other 25. But if you complete it and you convert and get a first down on that first play, or on that play, or this kind of alternative to an onside kick, then you get to continue the possession, which is kind of interesting too.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to take me a little time to absorb some of the rule changes and the differences that they have. And it's going to take me a little bit of time I need to see it in action, which is going to be harder because, as we know, especially for something like an onside kick rule, they just don't happen that often. And we'll have to see how they play in. I'm always skeptical about certain kinds of rule changes, which is for example, and while we both agree, the onside kick rule as it stands now, because of the need for safety and whatnot, needs to be changed and fixed. And they clearly are trying to get away from, in the NFL, having kickoffs. It's going to be interesting to me to see how that plays out in this league. So, I don't know that I have an opinion on heavily one-sided or not, other than to say it sounds interesting. I'm interested to see how it works. There's some other ones, though. The one that I'm talking about.
I'm getting to it
because I want to do it like a superhero introduction. He's Sky Judge,
Well, this
that
is
I'm all about.
This is exactly what I was pitching. Hey, I stand corrected. They actually changed the proposal for this 4th and 10 deal in the 35-yard line. It's from the 28, and they have to gain at least 12 yards. So they made it a little so they backed him up a little bit and forced them to gain a couple more yards. There must be some analytics that somebody did to make them change that, and that must have just happened over the last few days since I initially read that. Yes, the Sky Judge is a big thing. What the Sky Judge is a 9th official as part of the officiating crew, the referees. And they actually have Mike Pereira and Dean Blandino. I don't know what capacity they're involved with the league and front office. You may know them as the guys who talk on TV, but they're also former heads of NFL officiating, VPs or whatever this fancy title. Basically the Al Riveron role right now. Blandino being the most previous one to Al Riveron, and I believe Pereira may have preceded, if not somebody else, before Blandino. But these are the guys that are involved with helping shape these rules. Now, the Sky Judge, guess what they get to do? They can call a penalty or take away a penalty at any time on any play. There's not going to be any replays, I guess, other than the coaches' challenges, which they still get 2 per coach, obviously, and that's it. And everything else is going to go to this Sky Judge who's watching, I guess, in the stadium from the way I read it, but they're watching it on a screen. This is the same thing I was proposing. I didn't even know this existed when I said it. Maybe, what was that, like 3-4 weeks ago or whatever here on the show? And this is exactly what I was talking about, because this is the way it kind of works with FIFA and the World Cup. So this is, I don't know that one guy alone is good enough for this, but it's definitely a step in the right direction, especially when they can try to correct any errors that are made one way or the other on the field.
Yeah, I like the idea of it being individualized. In other words, instead of being a group or an individual of guys in New York watching every single game every week, you've got a Sky Judge assigned to every game. So each individual is only responsible for dealing with this game and these plays and the situations that are there. I think that is a better solution, but we'll have to wait and see. There is a potential for this to delay things. There's a potential for this to get out of control. But again, it's intriguing to me because when you think about it in theory, and I say in theory because I'm sure that it won't take long for the refs stink to come up even in the AAF.
Well, but it's a minor league, so I mean, if you already think the guys at the top of the NFL aren't any good, maybe you get some college guys or something. What else are they doing this time of the year? Unless they referee multiple sports for some reason. So
right,
but otherwise, I don't expect a whole lot.
Yeah. Anyway, I agree. I'm not expecting a ton, but there's the potential for situations like what happened in New Orleans to be correctable. Where it's clearly a missed call and they make it up, or the things that happened to the Steelers in like the San Diego game, where clear offsides is not called, or clear, false start is not called, and it ends up in a touchdown, and it gets overridden by the sky judge. I like the idea of that. The question is, how effective is it, and when does he make the determination? I think I saw something weird there. So I'm intrigued by it, but I need to see how it plays out.
Yeah, how often do you? I mean, you're going to have the coaches' challenges if they don't agree with the play. You're not going to have I guess the sky judge will be the kind of arbiter when it comes to touchdowns or turnovers. What I think they're trying to do is not delay the game with all of this extra dead space, and that dead space is aside from like a timeout or it's replay. I mean, let's just face it, it is definitely replay, and they didn't change the rules so much here. They wanted it to look recognizable to the NFL or even the college game, because when you try to watch Canadian football, I mean, it's just so out. It's like 3 downs and there's an extra 10 yards on the field, and there's I forget the goofy thing they have with the punts, with punts and punt returns. There's the motion running up to the line. It's a completely different game. How many people are on the line, and it's wild. It's wild to watch. I mean, I attempted to when I saw Johnny Manziel was going to be playing, and every time I attempt, as much as I think the Canadian Football League is a cool thing, it's not like it has like TV market penetration here, whereas this might be something that could catch on. I don't see this any differently from trying to watch like an East-West Shrine game, except or a Senior Bowl type thing or any of that. I think it'll be a little bit more interesting, obviously, because they're going to be games, and these teams should be more polished as they practice and play in actual games. Now, one of the biggest ones that's here too, they make about a lot of priority here with the head safety protocol stuff, but the other one is overtime, and I like this. They're saying it's the Kansas playoff, high school football rules of the Kansas playoff. Each team begins on their opponent's 10-yard line. They're given one possession, 4 downs to score, and that's it. Each team possesses the ball. Score remains tied after the game. After each team has their one possession, it's a tie for regular season. I like that. You don't have to have like 20 extra plays like you did week 1 with the Steelers and Browns. 20 extra plays for each side of the football, And then the NFL cut that to like 10 minutes, and I think there's just like a greater danger of injury there. I think that's part of the thinking with this. I think it's also fitted into that window of like 2 hours that they're looking for. They know the TV time's precious. They got to sell this to these, even though CBS Sports probably isn't airing a whole lot of anything besides maybe some college basketball. TNT, I don't think has anything going on right now either. There is not like a lot of major sports. I mean, Daytona 500's coming around, but you know what? Baseball's, the pitchers and catchers haven't reported yet and things of that nature. So you have a little bit of a dead period, and you got to sell this to TV time is valuable. It costs a lot of money. So you got to sell this to these network executives at these games. Well, yeah, it's only going to be a 2-hour game, but now it lasts, 2 hours and 45 minutes because of replay crap and overtime rules. And you're going to take something that likely isn't going to be, what do you want to say, it's still a professional league, but it's obviously not the NFL. And what they're trying to do is make sure that it doesn't bore people to death. And I think they've set it up quite well in that regard.
Yeah, I'm intrigued because there are players that we know here. There are players that we became somewhat familiar with either through training camps or actual contributions from the Steelers. I'm intrigued because guys like Troy Polamalu and Hines Ward are involved, and that that is, in my view, that can't help but be a good thing. And we'll just have to see. It feels of the leagues other than the World Football League, which I think was clearly, being a part of the NFL's process, was clearly football. I think unlike XFL, which is entertainment versus football, not that the sports aren't all entertainment. This feels more like football. If you get what I mean. So I'm interested in how this looks, and I will probably watch the games this weekend.
Yeah, whether I watch after that, because even the XFL had something like 10 million viewers or something like that for the very first kickoff game that they had, and then they went to do some like crazy kind of changes. They got rid of the coin toss and had those guys go head on to fight for the ball like a loose ball basketball drill. And the one guy got hurt, right? It hurt his shoulder right off of what was the air quotes here with my fingers, coin toss. And it was just like downhill from there. They had the running motion thing, and they had some of the stuff with the cameras and that, as you've seen in the ESPN special, that the NFL eventually like adopted, or some of the tweaks in that. They had an I won't say a lasting impression, but I think people remember it because, McMahon got a little too crazy with the entertainment stuff. They had fireworks and pyro, and they went to do something with, they had pro wrestling announcers as part of the broadcast team. Like, you even get Jesse Ventura in there, and it's like, it's hard to take that stuff serious when you have an announcer. He makes a comment about a coach makes comments back, and then they're like, oh, we could build this up. And it's no different than what the NFL does this too. I mean, they just did it with the Jared Goff as this young little boy versus, Tom Brady, the old geezer man. Old man Tom Brady. I mean, and that's paraphrasing it and making that a little like probably more sensational, but you get the drift. All they say is like with the age gap, and they do the same things. Revenge match for players that are coming back to face a former team. Those things are part of it, except, McMahon had the, the stigma of being part of pro wrestling, which is not on the up and up as far as a true competitive sport. So a lot of people questioned that, and it kind of faltered. It was also on like an obscure network too, which some of these games are going to be available to stream. You're not going to, I think they're all available through an app, just like the NFL stuff is, but you may be able to find it. But you mentioned Hines Ward, what is his official title? Head of Football Development. I guess he's, and they've hired a lot of female executives or coaches or staff as well. So you're seeing an influx of this into this AAF, and they're getting opportunities to learn and grow, as well as many others with this venture. And then, of course, Troy Polamalu, I guess he's the head of player relations. I think he really has to deal with whatever they're calling player engagement. I haven't seen what that's like yet. I guess they really want you to be involved with fantasy football with this, which I haven't drafted my teams yet. I got to see who's all going to be starting, and it's going to be interesting. We're going to go through this list now, but before I do, there's one other former Steelers quarterback, be it for one season. Michael Vick is going to be an offensive coordinator for the San Antonio Commanders. I found that to be kind of interesting. And there's some other quarterbacks and players, so I'm going to drill down. I think I had this listed by team. So starting with Birmingham, you have Josh Frazier, who was the Steelers' 7th round pick. Didn't make the team. That's the big defensive tackle / nose tackle from Alabama. He's playing for Birmingham. Johnny Maxey, who, if you may remember, he was on the defensive line a few years ago. He made the active roster, I think, when the Steelers were playing, the Dolphins in the playoffs, and then the Chiefs. Following that, he was there. Jacob Hagan, a safety, on and off the practice squad. And then probably the one that I'm going to be keeping an eye on, a guest of our show in the past, and a good friend of Steel City Underground. Why not Wes? Tight end Wesley Saunders, who Wesley Saunders may be one of the most high-profile guys out of all these names I'm going to say that are actually playing in these games. He's still trying to hang on here, man. He's 30 years old and still trying to make his comeback bid.
Yeah, look, this is going to be the answer to the question why, or a reposing of the question why not Wes. Because it's going to give him an opportunity to show. Yeah, look, when Wesley played, he was dynamic enough. He had a lot of potential. He he looked like he could become something. It just didn't work out for the reasons that most people know, and I don't want to go into. But, he's tried to turn everything around and become, and make a comeback, and it hasn't really panned out for him. But maybe this is a springboard. So we'll have to see. Look, if he dominates even at age 30, maybe he gets a couple more years. Maybe somebody says, hey, look, you know what? We need a tight end. Come on back, man.
Yeah, his unconventional methods of trying to just infiltrate different practice facilities is why he's the higher profile guy. I mean, he was still undrafted, and he was a great guy to listen to. It's definitely in the archives on our YouTube channel if you want to check that out. Probably from about 2 years ago when he was still making that push. He was playing in part of that spring league that was down in West Virginia as well last year. Here's some interesting names with Memphis. Zach Mettenberger, who never took a snap or was active in a game that the Steelers acquired as a third-string quarterback. It was supposed to be the Berger brothers, and he was out. He's going to be with Memphis. Of course, not all these I don't think all of the starters have been announced for these rosters, so we can't tell you for sure who's going to see playing time versus who's not, but I could guarantee you that Brad Wing will see a little bit of action, former Steelers punter, also with Memphis. Another guest we had on the show, actually twice, Scott Orndorff from Pitt. He's going to be playing with Orlando, as is linebacker Terrence Garvin, maybe most famously known for separating Bengals punter Kevin Huber's head from his shoulders on an Antonio Brown punt return several years ago, and Terrence Garvin was a special teams ace. He's bounced around the league. I know he was with maybe the Redskins last, maybe one other team. So they're with Orlando. I guess I'll knock the rest of these out, and we'll get some comments here from you, Brian. Dustin Vaughn, bouncing around as a quarterback. When Bruce Gradkowski got hurt in the preseason, we saw Dustin Vaughn come in. Trey Williams was Trey Williams and David Cobb are both with San Antonio as well. They're both running backs. Trey Williams hanging around, last year, maybe the last 2 years, Steelers practice squad, training camps. David Cobb was a guy who was actually drafted, I believe, by the Tennessee Titans, and then he was picked up off, I don't know, I don't want to say off a waiver. Somebody will probably correct me. I don't think he was a waiver claim, but he was somebody that the Steelers picked up maybe as a street free agent or something of that nature, and he was certainly someone who looked very talented at that time and just kind of didn't pan out when it came to his NFL career. Another gentleman that we had as a guest on the show and the 7th-round draft pick for the Steelers that's also going to be with this San Antonio Commanders is DeMarcus Ayers. I always liked DeMarcus Ayers. I always thought he was a nice little shifty type of slot guy. I just think that the Steelers were so deep at wide receiver at one point. I mean, he got to play because of injuries. If you remember, he was very instrumental in their win over the Ravens on Christmas Day to win the AFC North several years ago. Drew a pass interference call. Then he played the week later, with the GOAT, Landry Jones, and caught a touchdown pass. So I'm disappointed Landry's not a part of this, really. But that would make me an instant a fan of one of these teams. Cameron Clear, another guy that's kind of one of these off-season tight ends with the Steelers, also at San Antonio, and Darnell Leslie, somebody that you may not be too familiar with, but another guy who took a crack into Steel City as a linebacker. And then finally, now this, I'm going to say, let me bounce this from the list that I have. San Diego Fleet, Greg Ducre is a defensive back corner. You may not have seen his name around too much, but you definitely may have heard of Travis Feeney. He was 6th-round pick a couple years ago out of Washington, linebacker. Ended up getting plucked by the Saints when he didn't make the Steelers 53-man roster. And so he's with the San Diego Fleet. And finally, probably most fresh in everyone's minds, the nightmare, Terrell Watson, running back, also there with the San Diego Fleet. I love to see him. He always reminded me of like a wrecking ball. I don't want to say bowling ball. I think that's derogatory. A wrecking ball probably more accurately describes the nightmare as dubbed by one Mike Tomlin.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Look, I like Travis Feeney. When he was in camp, I had some hopes that maybe something could happen, even though he was a bit undersized. So we'll have to see how he pays out. We all had fun watching. It's just fun to watch a big bruising running back. So it'll be interesting to see how the nightmare plays. I'll be interested to see how DeMarcus Ayers, contributes. There are names. That's kind of the cool thing about this is there are names that are going to be at least peripherally familiar to Steelers fans, and in some cases even directly familiar, because they've had some connotation or connection with the team, and that gives you at least the beginnings of a rooting interest. For the most part, people fall in love with a team either because a specific player, and then they just stay with that team, or because it's their hometown team, and they get ingrained into rooting for them. So, for a lot of people where there's only, 9 teams or 8?
8 teams.
8 teams. So with 8 teams, that leaves a lot of the nation without a direct tie to becoming a rooting interest for one of these teams. So, you've got from Steelers fans, hey man, you got your pick. Pretty much 1, 2, 3,
just about all of them.
Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So, yeah, but most of them have an ex-Steeler on there somewhere. It looks like San Antonio has the majority, but
yeah, and they also have Michael Vick as their OC. So I mean, that's pretty much where I'm leaning between San Antonio and San Diego. If I'm tuning into any games, I happen to flip around and I see that. Though Birmingham interests me, I want to see Wesley Saunders, and of course Josh Frazier. How about this? He's not wearing 69 according to the official roster. So
forget it. I'm out then.
Yeah, no. If you don't know his nickname, look it up, folks. But that was the disappointment there. But yeah, I think there's enough here to at least interest you. Now, of course, if these guys end up not doing well, then it'll probably turn you off after maybe a week or two. But I have this curiosity. I'm like the cats that I have, and it's like this cardboard box. It's laying in the corner, and it's a cardboard box. But you know what? It's a cardboard box. It's a cardboard box. So I'm going to check it out. I'm going to hope for the best for these former Steelers, especially with those that are in the front office as well, especially Troy, kind of, been lurking in the shadows, real quiet guy with his private life. So, Brian, hey, man, check it out, and we'll come back to you with some I know Brian's always got draft stuff. I'm still waiting for the combine, but we're going to boomerang back with some actual NFL/Steelers news here in the future. Brian, thanks once again for joining me today.
Always a pleasure, man.
Always a pleasure. So, folks, there you have it. We actually made an episode about the Alliance of American Football. If it interests you, check it out. If you got any comments, maybe even some questions, I may reach out to a few of our former guests here and get their first impressions after a week or two here. We'll bounce those along. My name's Joe. His name's Brian. Until next time, we encourage everyone to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.